Welcome to the WGA Steel Cage Match, where we pit writers and publishers against each other. Thanks to our sponsors at the Rosa Foundation and the Writers Guild of Alberta, where every day writers enter their own hell in a cell to wrestle their demons. Thanks to Ashley Superfly Mann for putting this month's Steel Cage Match together. A huge shout out to our virtual audience. Thank you for being here. Buckle up. Today's WGA SmackDown includes 4 opponents. Netta, The Undertaker Johnson, Team Stonehouse, traditional publisher. Give us a wave, Netta. Awesome. Leanne Savage Jansen, Team Friesen Press, self-publisher. Leanne, thank you. Joel Trick Sutherland, team writer for a traditional publisher, Tundra and Penguin Random House. We got your way. Thanks, Joel. And finally, Karen Bad Bunny McDougall Barrow, team writer for self-publisher Friesen Press. You there, Karen? Yay, we gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome, wrestlers. May the best fighters win. Okay, fighters and viewers, let the combat begin. Yesterday, before us writers and publishers were just chatting online a little bit, and we were talking about the difference between independent publishers and indie publishers. And so we wanted to just clarify what that means on this particular panel. Is there anybody on the panel that wants to take this question? The difference between an independent publisher and an indie publisher, or traditional publisher, indie publisher.
I can, if you want.
Yeah, go for it, Leanne.
So, I mean, in general, independent publisher would be differentiated from indie publisher because it's actually a traditional publisher. It's just one that's not associated with a large corporation. So, Netta's Stonehouse. Yes, sorry, it's not right in front of me and my memory sometimes. Stonehouse. So she would be considered an independent publisher, whereas an indie publisher is actually the same thing as self-publishing.
Yeah, makes sense. Netta, do you have anything to add to that in terms of traditional publishing, or what do you call yourself as a publisher?
No, that's right. That's what that's how I would think of it. The main thing is that as a small independent publisher, we don't accept money from authors to publish their work, although we desperately need money. So it's the complicated thing. Sometimes I have authors wanting to do things and wanting to contribute, but I'm just like, I'm not really supposed to take money from you. So, yeah, even if there's something additional they want to do, sometimes we split publicity with them or something like that. But that basically we're supposed to shoulder all the costs of publishing a work, not get it from the author.
Right. That's a good, that's probably a good distinction as well. One of the things that I'm curious about as traditional publisher, indie publisher, do you both have access to grants, like Canada Council grants or AFA grants, anything that helps you in terms of the business of publishing? Netta and Leanne, I guess those are your questions.
We don't use grants and things like that, but our authors are able to apply for grants for funding to be able to publish with us. So the distinction being that anyone who's working with us is categorized as a self-publishing author. So we have authors that crowdfund or, apply for grants through their creative councils, things like that. And they can use that money to choose to work with us to self-publish, but we don't personally apply or take grants. The authors are paying for their services, they're paying for the publishing support, so they're taking that risk, and so the grants and things are available to them as opposed to us.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. And Netta, how about you as a publisher? Do you have access to funding?
A little bit of funding comes in provincially, and I think the traditional model has been that because books are not super viable because of the small margins in the industry and our competition from the US, which is about 90% of the market share here. Traditionally, there's been a lot of federal grant support for publishers. It's never felt like enough for I think the publishers that have been around since the 70s, but Stonehouse has been around for 10 years and we've never received anything from any federal source of grant funding.
Oh,
So
wow.
theoretically, we are eligible. So part of a bit of the strain in the industry is there's a lot of similar sized new publishers who just can't access grants that are spoken for federally. So
Do you
we're in
want us,
a liminal zone.
Netta, do you need us cage matchers to go visit the Canada Council for you on behalf of Stonehouse?
This is such a great idea. Yeah. Game changer.
We're strong. We could do it, right? That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, excellent. All right. So now we know the difference, kind of just for our listening audience, between publishing, indie publishing. Okay, so let's dive right in to our cage match questions. So team writer, Karen Bad Bunny, let's start with you. How long did it take you to publish your first book, and what steps did you take to make that happen?
Okay, so it's kind of a loaded question. So the way I'll answer it is that I've been writing for 12 years. I wrote 3 novels, and my third one is the first one that's been published, and it has been indie published through Friesen Press. So it just, I mean, some people may say if it's not traditionally published, it's not fully published. I think just a lot of us writers still have this, there's that stigma out there that if you're not traditionally published, it's, I don't know. So, but it's the first 2 books I kept going after the agents and the traditional routes. And it was only in this third book that I realized if you're not writing to the market, and they say write what you know, and I totally understand what that means. Because it's coming from your heart, it's everything about your book will feel more real. But if you're not writing to what the big 5 publishers want, what they think is trending at the time, it's difficult to get picked up. The agents aren't going to pick you up because they know they can't pass you on to the big publishers. So it was only by the third round I was realizing, well, it's difficult to get picked up by the big 5. So I went directly to small publishers, and even then, there's a lot of crickets, and so I finally made the decision to go with Friesen Press. I briefly looked at doing a full self-publishing and just doing it all on my own, but Friesen Press, you do have to have the funds. That's the problem with going with an indie publisher. You do have to have that income, and not everyone does. And then you're doing the self-publishing route where you're doing every single thing yourself. At least with Friesen Press, they help you with, you can get editorial, you could get your book cover, you could get a little bit of market promotional, support in terms of at least how to go about. So there is, you can pay as much. You can pay from 2,000 to 15,000. So it just depends on how big your package is, and yeah.
Awesome, thank you, Karen. I think you've answered all my other questions. That's awesome.
I don't even need to be here. Karen's got me. You're good.
And we're done, people. We're out. No, that's awesome. Thanks, Karen. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Joel Trick Sutherland. Same question. How long did it take you to publish your first book, and what steps did you do? What steps did you take to make that happen?
Sure. Try not to be jealous of Karen's nickname, Bad Bunny. That's just amazing.
Right?
Yeah, I like mine, but Bad Bunny. All right. So it was a while ago now. I have to think back, but so the first book I published, actually, I always wanted, I liked, mostly I was writing fiction, and I wanted to write novels. I'd written several trunk novels. I'm sure everyone on the call can probably relate and has a couple as well. Books that I've written that are in the trunk and will never see the light of day. I was sending things out to anyone and everybody, agents, editors. I had often heard at sessions like this one that people would say, especially in Canada, it's often easier to get an editor than an agent. So I was casting nets far and wide and not really getting too many bites. I was writing a lot of short stories at the time just to become a better writer, and I did get quite a few credits that way, just with small anthologies or e-zines or what have you, which helped to sort of build connections, which was invaluable, and get a little teeny tiny little name for myself, but not that much. But where my big break was in terms of writing books was actually my first book was a nonfiction book. And I didn't really plan it like this. I just had an idea where I work in a library. I work full time as a public librarian. And at the time, I was writing short interviews with my favorite Canadian children's authors. And basically, everybody said yes. Everyone I wrote to, including Robert Munch, I found his home address online. I don't know if it's still listed. Just like, was it a PO box? Just here's his house in Guelph. And I sent him a letter with these questions. And like 2 months later, this letter comes in the mail with his answers. I couldn't believe it. And I was just doing this for my library newsletter because I loved books. I loved children's books. I loved interviews. And yeah, it was fun. And then I thought, this could be neat to collect these actually into a book. And so I took that idea to the top. I thought, let's start with Scholastic and work my way down. And they said, no, that's not a children's book. We publish children's books. Children will not care to read these interviews with these authors, but this would be a book for adults that love children's books, which is kind of what I was doing, right? And I said, but they said, but if you think of a way to rework this concept a little bit, feel free to shoot us another email. And I'm the type of person, if I can get my toe in the door and it's not closed, I'm not moving, right? And I think you have to be an author, whether you go the traditional publishing route, the indie, the self-publish, you have got to be tenacious and never quit no matter what, and don't take no for an answer. So I gave it some thought, and long story short, I rewrote it as a creative writing guide for kids with some of these funny little interviews with their favorite authors, just sprinkled throughout. And that was the one that they said yes to. When they said yes, it still took 15 months to get a contract. And so that was a long wait and process with a few little updates in between. Another good piece of advice is always wear your patience pants if you're embarking on your publishing journey, because, oh boy, there's a lot of waiting.
Yeah, good points, Joel. That's awesome. Okay, let's move on to publishers. Team Stonehouse Publisher, Netta the Undertaker. So I have some kind of, just you probably get these questions all the time. How many manuscripts do you get a year? Any idea?
I'd say it's about 100.
100 a year. And how many of those would you publish?
2 to 4.
2 to 4. Okay. This is a bigger question. What do you look for in a manuscript? What's the difference between one that you accept and one that you reject? Just in general.
Yeah, and in
terms.
general, I'd like to say I wish I could accept a lot more than we do, just because, the financial constraints of publishing and printing, make it so that we have to do less and less at the moment. But I am a bit of an action maven, and I get bored really quickly. So although I do like really strong intellectual work, it probably you still, you can't start there and stay there and keep me waiting. Yes, yeah, because I like stories that start in the middle of some kind of action, give me things to wonder about, give me characters to hold on to. I definitely like starting in someone's head, or in an action scene, or somewhere where I'm not being told too much about what the scenery looks like or what the surrounding things are, or but that I'm really I'm invited to care about the people, even if they're villains. Invited to care about the personal story of villains or heroes before I'm told what they look like or what they ate for breakfast, or because I find that for me and for most people, it's like the emotional attachment to the story, the way of relating the feeling about the story. That's that's all where I am for a reader, as a reader. And I think most readers are in a similar place. So although we all want to set the scene and tell you exactly what kind of a 1920s typewriter is sitting on the table, if I don't care about the person sitting in front of it, I'm just going to be like, okay, take me to the story, take me to the heart. So in lots of different genres, it's the same answer. So if it's historical fiction, same thing. We published a novel called Encountering Riel, and it did what few historical fiction books I get do. It started you right in the middle of the struggle of this young boy who was a poetry student and had tried to impress girls by signing up for the army, and he never intended to be called up, but he was called up all of a sudden with no practice and no knowledge of how to be a soldier, and was sent to fight on the front lines. And seeing the story, the real resistance story from his perspective, it was entrancing. And historical fiction is not always like that. Sometimes it can be very, very boring, but in the process, it was so well researched that the history came through, but started in the personal struggle of a young person or an old person, and you've got me.
Excellent. No, that's great, Netta. So we're looking for character-driven work and action, tension. Basically, is that kind of what
action,
I'm
tension,
hearing?
mystery. Yeah, I'm a sucker for mystery. If there's something I don't know and I want to know, then I'll probably take the time to figure it out.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I'll ask each of this later. Okay, so let's go to Team Friesen Press, self-publisher, Leanne Savage. How many manuscripts do you get submitted a year? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, Nada, but I wrote down the title of that book because you just described exactly what I love to read. So
hey!
Thank you. So we're a little bit different. We see about 1,000, 1,200 manuscripts a year come through. And last year we published about 930 titles.
Wow.
So self-publishing is a little different. Now, in saying that, because it's self-publishing, we don't do censorship, right? So it's very much, if you are going to self-publish, we would love you to self-publish with us. However, there is one caveat to that, is that we read every single manuscript that comes through our doors. So we don't necessarily turn away projects, but we do have contextual pieces in our services agreement to ensure that we're following distribution guidelines, things like that. So the types of manuscripts that we would turn away would be pornography, hate speech, that kind of contextual piece. But because it is self-publishing, we take most manuscripts that we see. So out of the about 1,100 that we saw last year, we published 930 titles. So yeah, it's a bit busy. We're a big little organization, I guess you could say. And yeah, we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary and published our 10,000th title this year. So it's a little bit more of a hustle bustle, but in saying that, Netta, I'm assuming, has a much smaller staff than we do. And so that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Most of my staff are chickens, or I basically don't have staff.
Are your chickens literate?
Let's hope.
Yeah.
They're opinionated.
They
I
were
don't know
scared,
about literate.
like scared people. It's like, that's not very nice.
That's awesome.
So we read every manuscript. I can't speak to other service providers if they do. I can't speak to every service provider, but I know we read every manuscript to make sure that it's following distribution guidelines, and making sure that there's nothing hateful in what we're putting out there, because we want to empower people. We want to empower them to put their work out there, but we want to make sure that it's something that we also want to put our name on as well. So
That's awesome. Yeah, good criteria for sure. Amazing how many manuscripts you get a year.
It
Yeah,
is,
that blows my mind, actually.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
wild time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
that's just manuscripts we get a year. We talk to hundreds of new authors a month, and it's a big self-publishing is really, really blowing up.
Wow. Yeah.
Especially since the pandemic. The pandemic really made a huge shift with self-publishing authors because people had time. So people wanted to write books. So we saw a really big uptake when the pandemic hit and hasn't really slowed down since. People are still gung-ho. They want to publish their book. They want to get out there and yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Excellent. Okay. Let's move back to our writers. Joel Trick. Unless you want a different fighter name, if you got a better one, Joel, just give it to me. We'll use it. So I'd like you to just talk about your experience with the publishers you've had over the years and the pros and the cons of that. Anything you'd like to see change in the industry?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
give us an overview.
Sure. So, close to 20 books now with Scholastic and Tundra
Wow.
Books, imprint of Penguin Random House. Since that first one, and I just want to drill home that point. I don't know if I made it, but I think not just I throw it out there. Nonfiction might be your way in. It ended up being that way for me, kind of unintentionally. But since I can't tell you how many panels I've been to or discussions with publishers and agents, where they say that. Novels are hard to get your big break. There's so many people writing novels and so few opportunities to get published. Whereas with nonfiction, the quote that sticks with me, I heard a publisher once say, every year we're looking for dinosaur books. And by that they meant dinosaur and baseball and books about pandemics and books about history and books about they are just constantly looking for nonfiction and there's fewer people writing. So I like to throw that out there. Um, my experience, I guess, in a nutshell, there's pros and cons to everything. I always, people often come to me and say, do you need to go with an agent? Do you need to get, do you recommend traditional publishing or would it be better to self-publish? It's honestly, it depends on the book. It depends on what you're working on, the story you want to tell, what you want to do with it, who you want your reader to be. And it's going to be different case by case. It's a really independent sort of decision to make. And there's no one answer that just works for everybody. And I think any path you take, and there's a billion paths to publication, whichever path you take, there's going to be pros and cons. There's going to be setbacks. For me specifically, I suppose with the publishers that I've worked with, you do give up a lot of control typically. So I'm the author. I write the book. I edit the book. I'll do a copy edit, and then that's it. Which is pro and a con because it'll frees me up to then go write the next book. And that's how I can be so productive, right? That I'm not doing the cover art and the like hiring an editor and doing my marketing and publicity, although everybody has to do that. And everything else that I would have to do if I was self-published. But on the other hand, it's fun to do that stuff too, and it's your baby and you want to be involved. But it's interesting, my experience too, is that every traditional publisher too is different. And some are very, you're hands off. You write it, you submit it, and then you see it, a year later as a shiny new beautiful thing. Others really do work closely have worked closely with me too, to say, hey, we're thinking of these three people for the cover art. Do you have a preference? I even got to, with my young adult debut novel last year, I got to weigh in on the audiobook narrator. They sent me like 5 auditions and I got to listen to the snippets of my book. Oh my goodness, that was exciting. And say, here's my ranked 5. And they went with my top choice. So like, it really depends. But I would say overall, pros and cons to every single path. And at the end of the day, I like to write and I like to tell stories. And again, you can do that in any path you end up taking. And my particular path, I've been fortunate. I've been able to do more of that. I've had more time to write. So it's worked for me.
Awesome. Excellent answer. I know you and I talked about advances and you didn't want to talk about
Well,
or talk about
I
amounts?
get, I
Yeah,
get a
no,
little squirrely when it comes to money, but I do
yeah.
always say that, I'm sure everybody's heard this, but don't quit your day job. There's so few authors in Canada that can support themselves and their family, off of writing. This is totally anecdotal, but just from my own experience, you're either working, another job. I'm still, 20 books in. I'm a full-time librarian. I don't see that ever changing. Luckily, I love my job and it goes hand in hand with writing, but I certainly could not quit and start writing full-time if I wanted to. Um, and and so many authors I know that they do write full time. It's often because of other situations, circumstances, that their spouse works full time and has a pretty well paying job or something to that effect that can support the household. Um, yeah, just a little bit of cold reality there. We do it because we love it, right? We just love writing and storytelling. So, and the one thing you have to, I just quickly will say, the one thing, in case this doesn't come up later, I would definitely top of the list right now. This is like new, something I would want changed about the industry. This is driving me banana sandwich. Is that so? Talking about advances, so typically, you get your advance and it's broken into segments, right? So with me, usually I would get my advance. I would get half on signing the contract and the other half when I presented a polished manuscript. So once it's gone through at least editing, maybe not copy editing, but at least editing where the publisher's happy with it, they'll pay me the second half of the advance. Then with my newest book, with Tundra, it's three. That's fine. It's signing, it's presentable manuscript, and it's the date of publication, right? And then boom, I've got my full advance. What I'm reading about now is wild to me. It's being broken into four, and I've even heard maybe
Wow.
five, but four at least being 1 year. You get the fourth section of the advance 1 year after publication, which blows my mind. That is literally no longer an advance. It's the word means it comes before. That's like the meaning of the word. The fact that, and publishers are doing this to, try and I think it's the bigger ones, trying to like, obviously balance the books and stretch things out a little bit farther. I get it, it's a business, but I will say that anything in your contract, whether you have an agent or not, if you have an agent, I'm sure they'll fight that and try and get it down to three or two. But even if you don't have an agent, I've done my research. I've talked to people with agents that have gone through this as well. I haven't gone as far as like hiring an entertainment lawyer to look at my contracts, but I definitely did my due diligence and then made several requests right from book one. You can do that in any state. So you get a book contract offer tomorrow, go through it closely, and don't hesitate to advocate for yourself and look for ways to improve it. So yeah, that four section advance to me is definitely the one thing right now that I'm like, that has to change. Not on board
Wow.
with that.
Wow, yeah, for sure. Good. Well, thanks for talking about that, Joel. Again, we're just trying to give our listeners pros and cons on both sides of publishing. Yeah, let's go to Karen Bad Bunny. So I'd like you to talk about your experience with self-publishing. What was your reason? I think you actually already answered this question, your reason for choosing this route as opposed to traditional publishing. So talk about your experience with self-publishing and the pros and cons. And do you have complete control over your book title, cover, all that good stuff?
Okay, thanks, Lee. Yeah, the reason I'll come back to one of the reasons too. I always said I wish I was a painter. I wish that, painting had been my calling because you can paint something and you can put it on your own wall in a house and people can come and you can see it. When you write a book, if it doesn't get published, it just sits in a drawer. It sits on a computer. So I think it was just wanting to at least have a few people read it that pushed me to want to choose at least, let's go the indie route. I was originally looking at the full self-publishing, and like I said, I chose the indie just because of you're getting some support. And because I've heard that it can take months to translate like a Word perfect document into whatever Amazon, whatever format they use. It can take a long time to even learn how to do that process. So that's kind of some of my reasons for choosing. The process, it has been good for sure with Friesen Press. I think the highlight for me was the book cover. The day that I got the book cover, I was just sort of blown away, and it's one of the things I get complimented on a lot. And I mean, you don't know what to expect. You don't know, you go into this thing without really knowing what quality Friesen Press would have. And so I think from there on in, and then I was actually very impressed with the editorial feedback, because I had my work professionally edited before. And that's something I want to talk about, in that when, like I said, it's been a 12 to 14-year journey. And I think within that time frame, I was coming into the publishing industry just when things were starting to change, where people could get significant advances for their books. And also that people were what they were looking for, and also the amalgamation within the industry. They said there used to be about 80, decent sized publishers, and we've now come down to 5. So it's become much more money driven, in that a book has to have really good commercial value. And there was a time when an agent would take or write a kind of a diamond in the rough, polish them up a bit, then hope to get a publisher pick you up, and then the publisher would then work with you to really, get the shine on that diamond. And around the time I came in, like I said, about 10 to 15 years ago, that started to change, where now you were being told that what lands on the agent's desk has to be the best possible version of what you can deliver, and that meant having it professionally edited. So now you've had to put out a certain amount of money. I put out way too much to way too many for all the wrong reasons. So you've already invested. And so now, you come to the indie publisher, and they have additional editorial services, but you feel, well, I've already spent X thousand, let's say, on publishing. So that's the one thing I find it's a bit of a catch-22, is you've already spent that money to try to query the agents, and now you have that option to spend some more, so you can decide whether you do or not. But it's like you've already spent some money. So yeah, it's kind of like, how much money do you want to put behind this venture? But no, I mean, I have been impressed, and I feel like with Friesen Press, it is, you are offered all the same services that you would be with a traditional publisher. It's just that you are paying upfront for it. So it's like you are investing, as opposed to with a traditional publisher, where they're taking the risk. And one thing, the panel can tell me if I've got this wrong, but my understanding, and I think it's a lot of writers and newbie writers don't realize, that when you get an advance, you don't see any more money from the sale of your book until you've earned back that advance. So let's say you got a $10,000 advance, Dare to Dream, that until your book has sold $10,000 worth, you don't see any more money. So it has to sell more than the 10,000 to then start to get royalties. Whereas with indie publishing and self-publishing, you're seeing your royalties right away. So,
Right. Okay. Those are good differences that you've highlighted, Karen, and a lot of good reasons for choosing the self-publishing route as opposed to the traditional. Okay, Leanne Savage, can you talk a bit about the process for us from the minute you get a manuscript with Friesen Press to when it's finally done? And just for our listeners, ballpark figure, say I wanted to publish a 250-page book. Can you give me an idea of what I'd be looking at in terms of cost?
I can certainly try.
So, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, no problem. So our process, Karen, I loved what you said, that we're a unique service in that we try to mimic a traditional route for the author and have them have those services, but still they are maintaining their control. So the first thing we do is we read the manuscript, like I said earlier. That first initial evaluation is a fantastic tool. It'll help, with your metadata. It'll give you some great search keywords, BISAC recommendations. And an editor will pull out examples from your book of how they would edit it, accompanied by an editing recommendation. And I'm actually going to back up a step. The very first step is to talk to one of my team members and have a consultation, because every project's different. Every project's going to have different needs. So you have a consultation. We learn about your project. We learn what you've already done, what you need to do, and we put together some services that are going to be suited for you based off of those conversations. And then we evaluate your book. So we do that. Then from there, we go into editing, and editing is optional. So it is self-publishing. So you are still in control of your work. So if you get an editing recommendation from the editor and you don't love it, you can say, you know what, I'm just going to proceed with it as is, or you know what, let's maybe lower it a tier. I would really prefer to not have these contextual pieces touched. They make perfect sense to me, so I want to keep it as is. You still get to keep that creative control with your book, and it's an optional aspect. From there, you do your cover design and your layout. You have a personal publishing specialist who supports you through the process. So you're assigned somebody to work with. More so one-on-one. We have little teams in case people go on vacation and things like that. But more so one-on-one. They're going to help you, coordinate your cover design with the designer. They're going to relay notes to your designer for what you're hoping to see for your layout, things like that. If you have illustrations, if you're doing a kid's book and you're doing your illustrations with us, we'll do your illustrations. We'll get that process started, pencil sketches, color sketches, finals. And there's revisions in there as well to make sure that you have the opportunity to make the changes you want to see at every stage. And then from there, you have somebody who's supporting you through book pricing and coordinating your distribution setup. And then after that, if you've chosen to get some promotional support, we do offer promotional coaching and support, promotional materials. Like we can help you make a banner and a website. Postcards or bookmarks are really popular, of course, because we're making books, right? But what we do is more coaching and learning oriented. Our goal, because if you're an author, it doesn't matter what route you go, the marketing mostly lands on you. At least with your first project or two. If you start to get rolling, sometimes I know those traditional publishers will start to back you a little bit more promotional and marketing wise. But for the most part, the traditionally published authors that I've spoken with too are still very much in control of their marketing and promotion. And so we want to empower authors to learn how to do that themselves. Our goal is to coach and teach. So help you set up your social media, help you set up your Facebook or your Instagram, your X, I think it's called now, or your Twitter, Twitter's X, X, or your TikTok. And then from there, we provide coaching on how to use it, what to do. We support with social media content planning, things like that. It really depends. How you're going to move through the process and what you need is really going to depend on what you've already done, what services you need, and how much support, like how much individual support you want throughout the process. Some people really like to have support where they're direct, they need hand holding, they want all the advice, they want all that. And some people just are like, I want you to just do the things and I'll be over here and you just let me know when I'm supposed to do it. So like everyone wants a different level of support. So it depends on all of those things. And we try to individualize it as much as we can to each person. And sorry, I had a cough. I don't know if you noticed, I kept muting myself. Um, and price wise, it's also really dependent on those things, as I'm sure Karen can speak to. It depends on what kind of editing we're going to end up doing with your book. If you already have a really clear cover design in mind, or if you want a designer to put together options for you. Do you need promotional support and coaching, or are you a marketing guru already? So it really depends on what level of support and how much work was already put into preparing your manuscript versus how much you're going to need with us. So as Karen mentioned earlier, we do a consultation. So we make sure we're as up to speed on your project as possible. We try to get as much information as we can. We want to know what you've already done. We want to know what you need. We want to know how closely you need that support. And from there, we'll put together a suite of services depending on that consultation. So we have packages and services that start anywhere from $2,000-$3,000 all the way up to $15,000. So it really depends. It's very much how much you need versus also how much you're able to put into your project as well. Just as with any quality book, if you're self-publishing, if you want to put a quality book into the world, no matter what way you self-publish, it's still going to cost you money. So if you're a DIY self-publisher and you are going to get all of the editing done, you're going to vet your editors, vet your illustrators, things like that, you're still paying those illustrators and editors and things like that up front. And then going into learning the programs that Karen was saying earlier with formatting your book, learning those pieces, and then self-publishing it through Amazon or Ingram Spark or, places like that. And the difference is working with us is we kind of are a one-stop shop. We've already got those pre-vetted editors for you. We have freelance illustrators. We have in-house cover designers and layout designers, and we have those people that can support you one-on-one through the process who are doing it every day. So we're learning about the industry as it changes, and as things are changing, we're updating things on our end that wouldn't necessarily be really clear if you're not in it every day, like anything that's changing on retailers' platforms or with your distributor or things like that. Sometimes changes can happen really fast. And so it's important to be up to speed with kind of what industry changes are happening as they're happening. And it's difficult to do if you're not in it every single day to watch those changes happen. So yeah, it's a long process, and there's so many options available. And yeah, the first step is just chatting with someone about your project so we can learn about it and learn what you need.
Right. Awesome. Well, that gives us a good overview of indie publishing and the services that you offer a writer as well. So Netta the Undertaker, same as above. What's the process for Stonehouse from kind of the minute you accept a manuscript till you get it out to a bookstore?
So when we accept manuscript, ideally we, after the contract is signed, either agented or not, we start editing, and I'm actually editing right now, and because I'm a bit old school, I do it like this.
Yay.
And then I ship it back, and then I tend to tell them what I think should be changed, but unless it's straight up just a grammatical rule that isn't being followed or I don't think is being followed, it's a fair amount of leeway. If I think something needs to be trimmed out, but they're like, this is so key, then, it's their work ultimately. So then they get this manuscript and then make the edits and send back the file to me. I send the file to our designer. She lays it out. We collaborate on the cover, at least in the beginning part, in the sense that I give the designer my ideas about, what I was thinking for the cover, and my overall thoughts about the story and the place that it is in the market and what we're trying to signal to the reader about the book. So because that's even more important, shockingly, than what the author thinks, is like how to convey to the readers that it's their kind of book. And so I try to convey those things to the artist, and then the author sends us lots of images of covers they love, and different reasons for why they love them. And it really helps because then our cover designer is able to take all those images, some for vibe, some for vintage, some for just some style, some color, and then they give any other hints or thoughts or inspiration or tastes points to the designer, and then she takes them and usually is able to make something that everyone's really happy with. But there's not a lot of mock-ups. She's sometimes we pay her, sometimes we don't. And we don't have the luxury of being like, go back to the drawing board. We're just not happy. So generally she makes a masterpiece, and if there are adjustments they come through the process, but it's not like make 3 mock-ups, we'll see where we are. It's just like we try to give her as much information going into it because she has a 9 to 5, and sometimes her 9 to 5 is like 9 to 9, and she fits us in as she can because we're not rolling in money. And so it's a beautiful process in some ways, but there are constraints, financial constraints, time constraints. So that's how we get to the cover. And then we print a lot of arcs, and I send a fair amount of arcs to the author so they can send them to their contacts. I send out arcs to the advanced readers, the magazines and newspapers. We have a publicist. She works with different media sources, and then I send the books to them if they request them, and so on. And we go forward until we've got all the markup on all the arcs from anyone who's seen them in that sort of advanced release. And then we send them to additional copy editors to find all the additional typos. And then we gather them up before the final print, the real print, and then we input them all. The designer does, or I do. If there's just like a million of them, then I'm just like, okay, just give me the InDesign. There's no way you're going to be able to do this. It's 3 edits a page. But if it's light, then she does it. And then we come to a final file and send it to the other arm of Friesens, because we usually print with Friesens because we love them. And so that is how the books get out into the world. We don't have the capacity to pay advances, but we have been releasing books in spring. So by November, we're sending royalties to authors for sales. And if there are returns, let's just say an author sells 600 books in the first year, and then 200 come back the next year, we take note of those, but we don't claw that back. So that's how it works with us. So no advances though, alas.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to pop in here because Lee's asked me to kind of monitor the questions, and we have had a few come in. So if we wanted to stop there and address some questions and see how much time we have left for that, that would be a good thing to do now.
Great. No, that sounds awesome. Thanks, Ashley. She's the voice of must be like the ringleader, the referee or something there, right, Ashley?
I'll be the referee.
Superfly? Yeah, awesome.
Everything's been pretty tame so far, so I think we're okay.
I know, such nice people here, nice cage fighters, man.
It's great. It's great that we talk about these things in this kind of manner. Okay, so Paul has asked a few questions, and we've got a few other questions from other folks. So the first question from Paul is, do writers need an agent, and how do we select one? I know this has been covered a little bit, but maybe we could go more in depth with that.
Yeah, whoever wants to tackle that question. I mean, whether you're a writer or publisher, probably a writer. I don't know, Joel, you've dealt with agents?
I have. Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I mentioned before that I've always heard it's harder to find an agent to take you on in Canada than an editor. And certainly that was my experience, right? In the beginning, I was approaching agents, didn't get anywhere, didn't get my break just directly with Scholastic. And I will say that, like many of the big publishers, they had a notice on their website saying no unsolicited manuscripts, only agented manuscripts. I always hate saying this a little bit because I'm afraid they're listening, but they do that so they don't get like tens of thousands of submissions a year, but maybe only thousands or thereabouts, something manageable to go through. But they know that, like, a publisher, big or small, there's diamonds in the rough, and they're looking for that, right? And they know that not everything's going to come through an agent. So I'll just say that. And so, as I said, tenacity, that helps. But I started unagented. I did go with an agent eventually, and I'm actually back to unagented again. And so I've had, both experiences. And as I said, everybody's experience and mileage will vary, but for me, I got to a point where I've been doing this long enough. And even in the beginning, even with the first book before that, I was going to every single event like this one, in person, online. I was reading everything I could just because I was interested in it. I found it really riveting and I wanted to know more. And so I felt quite confident representing myself. And obviously there's pros and cons there. As I've said before, I need a t-shirt that just says pros and cons, but a good agent is going to go to bat for you. They're going to really know even way more than I would ever know about what they can ask for, where they can improve the contract for you. When you have to, like, maybe send an uncomfortable email to your editor, you don't love a certain direction they're going and you have a hard time saying that, an agent can come in and send that for you. There's so many pros and cons, but they take a lot of the money too. So, pros and cons there for sure. But if you're looking for an agent, then do your homework, do your due diligence, speak to people about their experiences with their agents. Look online. There's so many databases that tell you, listing all the agents' information, and there's quite a few out there still, of course, that are quite candid in saying that this agent has lots of great reviews, or this one, there's been a lot of complaints. There's some red flags there as well. And so just take a look and make sure you know who you're talking to. And then if you do get that call or that email saying, like, it would typically, I guess, be an email now saying, hey, I'd like to schedule a call. You send out your manuscript to agents and you get that call. Do your homework on that person extensively. And then when you speak with them, don't just say yes, like, right away. Like, that call is a chance. They're seeing if they want to work with you, but you get to see if you want to work with them. And honestly, I think the worst, honestly, would be signing with an agent that you're not clicking with, someone you're just not going to work well with. You have some concerns, whatever that may be, about their working style. You need your agent. If you go with an agent, they need to be your number one supporter. I will say that.
Awesome.
All right.
Actually,
I'll jump in there really quickly. I can jump in really quickly and just say, from my experience, to go with the big five, the big publishers, that's, as Joel said, you need an agent. Whereas if you're going with smaller publishers, of which there are many, many, many more, you don't need an agent. And like I said earlier on, I just focused on the agents, not realizing I could also send my work out to the smaller publishers. And the reality being that, we'd all like to think we can make it big with our very first book. But the reality being, it's more likely that you're going to get picked up by a small publisher. And then, depending on how much of a career in writing you want, it's going to work. You can build on that and go. And then maybe one day you do go off to the big five and you get an agent, as Joel said he did.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Ashley?
All right, we have another question from Shannon, and this is geared to Netta, I believe. How many ARCs do you usually print to send out to people? And do you utilize NetGalley and provide EPUB ARCs?
Yeah, we print about 50 ARCs, sometimes less than that, depending on who wants to see the book. Some of our authors really have lots of connections and want to send the book around, and some are like 10's fine. And it just sort of depends what the situation is there. We are a distributor, Lit Disco, lately has an account with NetGalley, and so I guess I'll experience that in the spring. So we will take part, but I don't have any experience with it. And yeah, we have not exactly EPUB ARCs because we don't usually put them in EPUB till the final version, but we have PDF with covers. So yeah, a lot of people like those, and the rest we just send the main ARC physical to them.
Awesome.
All right, we've got another question from Skylar. What is the award world like for self-published authors? Can it be more challenging to get into traditional writer in residence spaces without a traditionally published book? So kind of two questions in one there.
I guess I can maybe take that. So in the last decade, the self-publishing awards circuit, I don't know if that's the right word, but the self-publishing award availability has really increased actually. There are lots of awards. I think we were talking about this a little bit yesterday too, in our emails, you guys. There are places that require your publisher to submit your manuscript, which means you need to have a publisher. So you can't be a self-published author to go through those award avenues. But there are a long list of self-publishing awards or awards that have started to accept self-published titles. And it's just really looking for them. I've got actually, Ashley, am I allowed to share a resource? I have a list on my website.
Yes, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll pop it in there. There's, Independent Author Network. They do Book of the Year awards. There's the Canadian Book Club Awards. There's Independent Publisher Book Awards. There's lots of independent book awards out there now. So it's just really finding, researching and finding the ones that would meet, especially for poetry. I think you had mentioned specifically, especially finding ones that are really poetry geared. And so that list I just shared there too has, like entry fee costs, potential prizes, things like that. So, yeah, I believe it was updated earlier this year. We try to update it at least once a year. So, yeah, it's pretty up to date, but yeah, it's really come around, and the stigma around self-publishing has really started to shift, even in the last 5 years. So places are really starting to come around to the idea that self-published does not mean vanity. It just is a different avenue, and there are, if you go to, for example, the Canadian Book Club Awards, I just got the list last week or the week before. Friesen Press has 7 finalists in that awards in different categories for that awards this year. So it's there definitely is now more of an open space and less of a stigma around these, and so they're becoming more readily available for sure. Writer in residence, though, I'm not as sure. I'm not as familiar. Ashley might be able actually to better answer that than me, because typically writers in residence are part of writing organizations and things like that. And so she might be more equipped to answer what the criteria is for those pieces.
Yeah, actually, I assume that each organization probably has their own set of guidelines, but offhand, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. It's something that we can definitely look more into. I don't know if somebody else can speak to the typical guidelines with the writer in residence requirements, but yeah, I'm not quite sure myself.
So Ashley, we're sitting at 1 o'clock here. Do we want to just chop it? Or is Cage Match done? We've been super nice to each other.
Yeah,
What's your sense?
I know that everybody's kind of got their, their regular days to get back to, and lunch is over for most folks, so it's probably a good time to cut it off, even though we have had a couple other questions come in. But at some point maybe we can have another conversation and chat more about this. But right now the time has come to end things.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Leanne, Netta, Joel, and Karen for coming out to the first first ever WGA cage match. We hope we've given our fellow writers some insight into whatever style of wrestling publishing works for you. Whatever you do, go forth and fight, live to fight another day on your current project in your hell in a cell. Bravo, writers and fighters everywhere. You rock. Thanks for joining us all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
WGA. Appreciate it.
it was really nice to be here.
Yes, thanks for inviting me to join in.
Of course,
Awesome.
thank you, everyone. And there will be a recording going up on our YouTube channel, so just take a peek at our socials in a little bit, and that will be added here in the next day or so, just for everybody asking in the chat. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.